So hi, everybody. Welcome to this conversation around interoperability and partnerships, and what that means for transforming agricultural systems, not just in Africa, but globally. I will be your host, your armchair buddy, since we're a small group. Beverly Hatcher Mbu. I serve as a Deputy Director of Programs at Development Gateway and IREX Venture. I am based in DC, Washington, DC currently, but originally from Nigeria. We've got an absolutely standout group to chat with today, people who are smart, who are dynamic, who say the difficult parts out loud. So I really want this to be an engaged conversation. We may not be all in one room, but I think we can connect with each other really well. So I'll turn first to my right, as it were, to Mr. Omar Bakari, if you want to introduce yourself briefly to our awesome crowd.
Thank you very much, Beverly. My name is Omar Bakari. I'm from Tanzania here, and I'm really focusing on promoting use of data and emerging technology for informed decisions. A Tanzanian country in the development of the digital agriculture strategy, but also I'm the chairman for Agricultural Input Trust Fund, which is a fund supported by the government of Tanzania.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Omar. Fumibi, would you like to introduce yourself next?
All right, thank you, Bev. Hi, everyone. My name is Oluwafunmi Asmon, and I work at Pula as a partnerships project manager. And what we're essentially doing at Pula is to power the resilience and profitability of smallholder farmers. I'm also attending the Oxford School of Climate Change training program, and I am really excited to talk about partnerships and systems interaction, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Fumibi. Very, very happy to have you. And last but not least, my colleague Usman.
Hello, nice to see Fumibi and Umar here again. And I work also with Development Gateway, and I'm the program manager for a program called VIFA, Visualizing Insight for African Agriculture. And we've created a comprehensive fertilizer data repository. I will drop the link in a few minutes in the chat for the upcoming African, the AU Fertilizer Summit, which is also a crucial resource for countries, policymakers, private sector investment decisions, but also program development. And we are focused on 8 countries, but we also gathered and visualized data from 14 countries in Africa. Great to be here, and I'm looking forward to learn and also share a few of our learnings. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Usman. So why are we here? We have a super fancy title around transforming food systems and the power of interoperability. But what does that really mean? In a nutshell, where we're going with this conversation over the next hour, the next 50 minutes, is really fundamentally that you cannot talk about building, scaling, or maintaining digital technology in agriculture without interoperability. The idea is that people, systems, and institutions are connected. Not a revolutionary concept, but a critical one if we talk about developing digital agriculture spaces that are fit for AI, fit for machine learning, fit for large language models. Our discussion today will take us through what interoperability means in practice, through the perspective of civil society. So coming from Mr. Omar Bakari, who's done incredible work in Tanzania's digital and data space over the last 15, 20 years. From the private sector, we have Fumibi coming from Pula Advisors, the people who are making crop insurance look cool. And then from the development sector, that being Usman Kone, who's spoken a little bit about some work that our organization has done around fertilizer. I will try not to use and abuse my moderator's privilege, but I may pop in from time to time, but largely I want our incredible panelists to be able to take it away. All right, so with that in mind, why don't we get right in it? And I'll just remind those who may have joined belatedly, please, if you're comfortable, introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're located and one thing that you're working on. It would be nice to get to know each other since it's largely talking to a screen. All right, so let's get into it. So the first question we have is when we talk about interoperability, we are talking about interoperability because we see a gap in this space. Usman, what are some of the barriers to adopting new technology and how can we overcome them?
This is the $1 million question, right? And I'm saying that because it's such a a huge challenge we are going through right now, and this is from different perspectives. Let's start from the people at the center of what we're trying to build, farmers. The very limited number of farmers who are actually literate, looking at in villages and rural areas in Africa, and most of the tech tools that are being developed do not take that fact into consideration during the product design phases. And it's great to see we have some product developers here. I would love to hear from them at some point. But that is one of the craziest obstacles to the adoption or actually the use of it. But using is something, but knowing about what's around is also another challenge. There are a lot of tools that have been developed here and there, but they're not all kind of like easily accessible in the repository, and people don't know about them. And even when they know about them, they don't know how to use it. To give you an example, I told you that we're developing a platform with data, if it's a data repository, but we've been engaging a lot of users across countries and sharing and talking about this product. But we realized that until we get to sit with them to do some demonstration and training, people can get confused and won't jump in right away. Another important stakeholder to look at is private sector. So when you think about digital transformation, most of private sector folks will think about costs. They will think money. How do we get money to invest in this? Is it worth it? What's the return on investment? So that's also ignoring that there's a lot of cost-saving approaches. And at DG, this is something we promote a lot. We work a lot with open source, platforms, tools, and technologies. So the use of those open source technologies enables access to software, but also sometimes hardware tools. And the good thing is that this is without incurring high costs associated with licensing fees or even proprietary systems. So using open source is something great, and this is something we have at core at DG. I will add one last thing, which is about application programming interfaces, APIs. So having the tool is something, but getting data from various platforms and having it at the repository in whatever product you're developing is something that a lot of organizations are doing here. And I think private sector within the ag space can take advantage of that. There's a lot of data here and there are a lot of possibilities through APIs to get access to those data for free and make them tell the story they want to hear or the kind of information they want to see. I will conclude with government, because we cannot talk about all this without mentioning them, because they are what I would call the enablers, right? So they need to also make sure infrastructure are available. When you look at it, it's great to have these products, but without internet, without tech platforms, it becomes hard. And they have a great role to play into this. And you can go through it until we talked about electricity, literacy skills, how do we embed that into the educational system, how do we have more literated farmers. So it's a lot of components to look at. And I think all this combined could also increase the new technology adoption. I would like to conclude with one example. Most agricultural companies rely on extension agent, right? Because we realize that farmers most of the time don't know how to read and don't know how to write, which makes it harder to use some of these tools. So most of us now rely on extension agent in the field. They are trained, usually they know how to use these tools. But another challenge I'm going to conclude with is that, for example, in Ghana, we have a ratio of 1 extension agent for 1,500, which means that 1 extension agent, even if it has access to new technologies, have to visit about 1,500 farms, which is almost impossible and which makes the gap even wider. So question mark again for the team and the participant here. I would love to know about how your organization is dealing with this. And if you have a few things to add, please, and they're welcome. Thank you, Beth.
Fantastic. Thanks, Usman. I think that you did a great job of framing sort of where is the challenge, but also where is the opportunity as well, starting with the systems and the data. So to switch tacks a little bit, to carry us to the next step, from the private sector perspective, for maybe what are the most effective ways for farmers to improve profitability while also promoting sustainability, both financially and when you're thinking about the broader environment? How do you think through these issues through the lens of insurance at Pula?
Thank you very much. I think that for the aspect of profitability and sustainability for smallholder farmers in Africa, I think that one step to do that would be through precision and modern technology use, where, for example, farmers that have issues on the ground are able to report directly where those issues are coming from and also get solutions to them. So, for example, instead of them using the wrong pesticide to treat maybe locust invasion, for example, they are able to know exactly what pests or disease is affecting their crop and apply the correct amount of solution to it. That way, they are not trying so many different solutions at different times before arriving at the correct or accurate thing that they need to apply. Secondly, would be access to market, because currently we lost about 40% of post-harvest losses, and that is a huge amount of money that is being lost by smallholder farmers because there are no tools for proper storage or proper transportation to the market, or there are no market leakages even when the produce have been created. And so improving like market leakages for smallholder farmers to ensure that they are able to get the produce from where it is made to where it is consumed without losing as much as 40% is also another way to ensure sustainability because of the limited resources that are used in kind of growing those crops. And then, but however, to be able to achieve market linkages, infrastructure development is another very important thing, because currently across Africa, it is very difficult to transport food from one place to another. And so it is very important to have organizations or solutions like the Code Up or the Elo Tractor or Pula, for example, where we are creating all of these systems that ensure that the infrastructure is in place to ensure that farmers have the much needed access to technology and also connectivity that they need to kind of improve profitability. Another thing that I think can be done is applying sustainable agricultural solutions, because now we know that resources like water is limited, and we need to also prioritize how we are using these limited resources in growing our crops, and also prioritizing the use of land across fuel, nature, and food needs of humans. And so practicing sustainable agriculture is important, and also kind of conducting trainings around that so that the smallholder farmers are aware of what kind of practices work for their specific niche and areas is also very important. But to be able to do all of this, access to finance cannot be excluded, because for farmers to access improved crops, to access improved variety of crops or seedlings, it comes at an extra cost. And then we ask maybe private financial institutions or developmental bodies or government to kind of contribute to that amount, which means that we are increasing investment in this system. However, increased investment means that we are also increasing risk, which is where insurance comes in, where while all things might go wrong, you might have given them an improved seed, you might have conducted trainings, you might have ensured that everything was properly done at the right time. However, climate change currently is very unpredictable, and excess flooding or pests and diseases might affect the hard work that has been done for moving people from poverty into like a sustainable economic resilience bracket. And then we do not, if without like a risk layer like insurance, for example, protecting that investment, they can easily fall back into poverty. And insurance is very important because it kind of ensures a decent livelihood, and it doesn't feel like an handout to farmers, because they can see that this is how much I've invested, this is how much I took as a loan from the bank, and this is how much I can get if anything should happen to this investment that I have put into my farm. And also, insurance also ensures that institutions like financial institutions are encouraged to give loans, because they are assured that if anything could go wrong, I'm not completely losing the total amount of investment that I have made in the smallholder farmers in these communities. And so that is how I think we can increase profitability, but also ensure that financing is sustainable for smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thanks, Fumimbi. I think you weave in so many things really well, that a part of preparing for resilience is about making decisions right now, long-term decisions, shifting from short-term to long-term thinking among farmers and giving them the tools that make them feel like they have the information they need to make that call for today and for the future. Excellent. So let's keep it rolling from there. I'm shifting to you now, Omar. How can we effectively integrate technology into existing agricultural systems, starting with citizens, farmers, and really people? We talk a lot about the technology and the data, but what about the people? Hi, Omar, if you're able to hear me, I think there might be a delay.
So thank you very much, Beverly, for that question. I think the most important part, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Beverly?
Yes, I can. I think there's a slight delay, but I can hear you.
Hello? Okay, so I think the issue of interoperabilities of people specifically is very critical. And normally, one of the biggest mistakes we always start is to go into the technology instead of asking people to integrate first. And the most important part, which we have not managed in terms of not being connected as people. And I've tried my best to look at the evidence of what we are missing on that context. Normally it happens, we claim it is not a good idea, but that's how we. And in order to do that, we really need to kind of having a bigger picture of the system approach, where we are trying to link the people and the system together. And in order to be able to do that, in my opinion, there are different levels and the stakeholders that needs to be participating in this context. Linking people who are for government systems, you really need to kind of integrations of moving out of this silo system that has been existing actually in most of our African countries. And in order to be able to do that, there should be an establishment of the evidence on what we are really moving into that. So we are seeing most of the countries now jumping into linking the systems, while actually the first idea is to kind of putting people together and agree on how they can collaborate and identify specific roles to minimize the duplication of the efforts that has already been going on. We have collected an evidence of the same ministry, people collecting same data on the same particular area. This is very simple, just because during the design of these kind of programs, the coordination aspect has not been well invested on it. So in my opinion, I think it has to start the interoperability of people, so that all of them, they co-create the integrations and making sure they jointly have identified roles and responsibility. And through that, then the interoperability of systems can come at the later stage. So in a summary, that's what I can say so far, and then I will add as we go on to the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Omar. I think that really gives critical food for thought. So much when we talk about what the digital future is, we're focused again on the data, we're focused on the systems. And we really need to be talking about people. People need to remain connected going forward for us to see the kind of scale we're really looking for in most areas of digital agriculture, whether you're talking fertilizer and other inputs, or you're talking about specific cash crops. So I want to turn a question to all of the panelists for us to chew on for a little bit. We've gotten a little bit of the development partner perspective, a little bit of the private sector, a little bit of civil society. So how can we promote collaboration among various players in the agriculture ecosystem? I'm wondering if you have any good practices that you've seen for cross-stakeholder or multi-stakeholder collaboration. Usman, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. And I will share, let's say, some examples from what we've experienced on the program I'm currently working on. One more time for the one who were not here before. I'm working on a program whose objective is to, make sure we're bridging fertilizer data gap, because without fertilizer currently in the program, you have huge food security issues. So we want to make sure the data is available in the repository format, visually accessible, and that, policymakers, private sector, etc. are able to access it from a click and inform the decision-making processes in a nutshell. And in November last year, we launched, let me drop it here in the chat. 1 second. We launched the Africa Fertilizer .org platform. I just shared the link with you here. And we brought together government and private sectors from several African countries. So you had about 10 countries represented in that room, all in that room, discussing the challenges and sharing knowledge, which is not happening frequently. So that was a great way to bring them together so that they can see what's going on in each of these countries, what are the challenges, what decisions have been made, what opportunities are here and there where people can go and invest in. Why am I saying that? Because in the room, we had some representative from Ethiopia, and Ethiopia is known as a pretty closed market. Everything is government-led. And as an anecdote, this is one reason we did not have Ethiopia in our initial phase of the program. We started with 3 countries, and Ethiopia was not part of them, but we then added the 5 more, including Ethiopia. But from these kind of meetings where the decision makers from Ethiopia were able to engage with others in the others 8 countries, was a great opportunity for them to learn from them, but also understand that sharing, being open about the data, being transparent and sharing data was the way to go. So finally, we've been able to organize the very first fertilizer technical working group with the Ethiopian stakeholders this year, and we've developed also the dashboard for Ethiopia that you can see on this platform. So it started by gathering the right people together and having people from the right profile who seeing opportunities and challenges more or less from the same angles in the same room. And why this is important, and I'm going to share this second story based on the challenges we are facing and how that could be of interest for everybody to collaborate. So we're actually investing in Mozambique to close fertilizer data gap, because we have an idea of what's getting in the country in volumes, but we cannot tell what product exactly is getting there. And Mozambique is a corridor to other countries in Southern Africa, like Zambia, Malawi, DRC, Zimbabwe, etc. So having transparency from a data perspective and for the data and technical perspective in Mozambique is a door opener for other countries, because we know exactly what kind of fertilizer get in the country and what get out to others countries, like the one I've just mentioned. So collaboration between these countries is super important, because it allows us to have a greater visibility on what's going on in the southern part. What's happened when this is not the case? Well, we have very low visibility. We don't know what fertilizer is in the country. Then the agricultural season starts and there is almost no fertilizer, or not affordable fertilizer, or fertilizer is still in the boats coming and it's not getting in the country at the right time. So all these information are critical for not only private sector to know what are the gaps where I can invest, but also for the government to be able to regulate, to work on the policy level and the regulatory level to make sure that the environment is there for collaboration, data sharing, and for the benefits of the country, the region, and even the continent. These are a few examples I wanted to share here about what we are doing it, and I think it really starts by bringing the key and the right stakeholders together in one room. That can happen at the country level, but also the regional level, and this is something we've been doing for years, and it's working perfectly. If I have 1 minute to close out this, Beth, the last example was in Nigeria 2 months ago, where for the first time, we're able to bring together more than 80 blenders for a particular fertilizer type called NPK. And this was an eye-opener for most of the private sector in understanding what product is being blended, what is missing, where is it in the country, what are the needs, and this is huge investment opportunity for them. And they are willing to invest and cover the cost for such gathering in the coming years. Just saying that bringing people together could be a great kickoff, particularly coming from development partners. Thank you.
I love that. Thanks so much, Usman. Omar, I feel like I saw your camera on for a little bit. Did you want to jump in here about some good practices you've seen around collaboration?
Yes, I think the most important part is to understand why the collaboration doesn't happen. And it's more about people, to be honest. And people who are measuring the impact of what they invested, for example, the donor community themselves, they don't collaborate much, because each country, they will ask results based on the resources that they're asking. So that has been triggered down to different partners and whatever it is. But I think now we are starting to see, for example, the government of Tanzania and enhance the collaboration.
Hi, Omar. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but you're breaking up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try turning off my camera.
We are seeing now nobody sometimes thinks instead, yeah. And the idea is, instead of moving ahead, because of the lack of collaboration, we tend to do things every time the way they need instead of moving ahead. So there are key areas that we are really doing at the moment. The government has the capability to coordinate within themselves in terms of their department, but also with the partners, because from the partner perspective, nobody will go on the ground and do something without their approval. And it was unfortunately that the same ministries, different people approve it and without knowing each other. And then one is complaining one has the information. So based on these ones, now we are seeing some improvement into that. But also the collaboration should be driven by the value proposition of each partner. For example, from the private sector, we'll collaborate with the government because, for example, Vodacom, they will be happy to collaborate because they can access the data that they want to design a mobile financial solutions for them. So until each partner has a clear value proposition, it stimulates that collaboration in place. But as I said before, different components need different strategies to enhance their collaborations within themselves, but also beyond the security sector that is in place. I know, for example, from the UN, they did have one UN fund to stimulate that, but still there is some challenges here and there. From the government side, still, and it's really driven by the personalities of people. There are some countries have put which actually has managed to enhance collaboration. For example, if you are a donor, you want to finance in agriculture, every donor, there's a clear path that need to be going through instead of just bypass and go to somebody else in the government. So that needs to be done. And in my opinion, now we are going to the right direction.
Excellent. I think that's really powerful, being able to frame the challenges as well as like why, like frame in clear terms what the difficulty is. Like we like the idea of interoperability or partnership, but partnerships take work and sustained work over time. Fumi, from your perspective, anything else you'd want to add here? Any good examples you have that you want to share out?
I think from the private sector, like they've said, we are very much concerned about value and our bottom line because some of the targets are very costly. And so for Pula, for example, when we enter, because we don't take risk, right? So when we enter a new market, for example, we try as much as possible to retain as much money in premiums in that country. And so we form like consortiums of local insurance bodies that exist in that country so that they can take on the risk and then place maybe a reinsurance risk with another external body. And in doing that, we're not only creating value for the community or local insurance bodies in that context, but we're also ensuring that we are collaborating and testing new products. Because, for example, there are livestock products or crop insurance products that are new. So, for example, maybe the pay-at-harvest insurance products that we wanted to test because we found that it is possible for smallholder farmers to pay more, so to be more willing to pay for insurance at the end of the season than at the start. However, somebody needed to cover for that insurance cost at the start of the season. But Pula did not have enough money to be able to test that product to see. And so we had to like partner with like another developmental body to be able to pre-finance the cost of insurance to be able to test that. And that kind of allowed us to collaborate. And I think that to get organizations in the private sector to collaborate, I think that we need to keep sharing the impact that collaboration has, especially on testing new products and increasing adoption, because if we had not tested that product, the product otherwise would not have been taken up like in the other markets that we now have it launched. And so using that collaboration mechanism to kind of increase adoption of our product, and then also improving our value and bottom line as well in that process. I think another thing that would help as well is also pushing for the fact that we are going to be optimizing resources. Because when we do insurance in Pula, at the end of the season, we go on ground and collect data, economic data, yield data, like what is the dry weight of your harvest and what is the wet weight of your harvest. In doing that, we can also collect data around marketing and research. Say, for example, what kind of fertilizer did you apply? How much of the fertilizer did you apply? When did you apply your fertilizer? But all our agent does is go to the farmer, collect yield data and go. Another agent comes, collects fertilizer data and go. Multiple resources are being expanded or being expanded in collecting different data from the same set of farmers, while we can collaborate and save costs and reach a larger number of farmers with the same amount of resource. And so I think that the private sector will understand it better from that perspective than anything else, that it is creating value and also better use of limited resources. I think that's the only thing I want to add to the points that they've already made. Thank you.
No, that's perfect. So I do have one more question for all of our panelists, but I wanted to take a beat in case there are any questions from the audience, questions or comments. We are not necessarily the experts. I think we're a virtual room full of experts, so we'd be happy to hear your expertise. So I'll just pause here for a moment. If you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat. Otherwise, I'll ask my one more question to the panelists. And if you have any curiosities around interoperability is a term that gets used a fair amount. If there are any questions you've always wanted to ask, there are no bad questions, there are no silly questions. This is a space where we can talk through that. So please feel free to share that as well. All right, I'll give people a moment to think, and I'll go to one of my last questions for the day. And this is for all panelists. From each of your perspectives, how can we encourage knowledge sharing? So you've talked a little bit about the building blocks of putting partnerships together, but what can we do to encourage knowledge sharing and in particular cooperation across countries and eventually globally? So we talk a lot about national institutions, but a lot of the data, a lot of the trends, a lot of the patterns need to connect at regional level, at continental level. So what can we do here? What are some good practices around knowledge sharing? And anybody can start.
I think that from my own perspective, we found that market-led or making certain things mandatory is always a good way to go. So I think that enacting knowledge sharing processes, what is the process, what is the system, what is the questionnaire, like enacting the framework or the roadmap from start to finish and making it like a kind of mandatory process, especially for private sectors, because it's very hard for us to openly share certain information unless we are asked. And so enacting that kind of a process for knowledge sharing, but more so even easing cross-border or market entry movement, because it is one thing to have information or to know from the work that Usman is doing in Mozambique, for example, the kind of fertilizer that is being applied and the kind of product, but also how are we able to use that information in Mozambique as another organization like Pula to kind of increase our own work as well, or create value for ourselves. And so even as we are enacting knowledge sharing processes, I think that making as an incentive for participants to be able to kind of use or utilize the information that is available in ways that are less limiting, I think would be one of the ways that we can encourage knowledge sharing, at least from the private sector perspective. Thanks.
I love that perspective because I think there's sometimes a stereotype that private sector is not interested in sharing the data. And obviously it depends by industry, it depends by subsector, but I think it's about highlighting where the value add is for everybody. Everybody benefits from a clear collective picture, including folks from the private sector. So thanks for going into that. Other knowledge sharing, Omar or Usman, you want to jump in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Go on, Usman.
Okay, thank you. I like something that Omar and Mimbi have said. I will come back to that very quickly. I do think at this point, founders and grant partners, they have a kind of force. They have to kind of like force the partners to share data and making it the public good. If you look at it closely, you know, they kind of like drive the objectives and the work that we are doing in the field, of course, in consensus with governments, but also, you know, taking some insight from the many work overall. So I think that has to be kind of like mandatory, and looking at it, there are different interventions and they tend to stop at a national level. How are we modifying this to cover both regional and continental level? How do we go from national to regional, continental level? And I think there are a few agreements that are out there. And how do we engage with mostly government to make sure those frameworks are known, but also used? This is a tremendous work. To give you an example, we are getting most of the fertilizer data from government, right? But within the same entity at government, you will have 2 to 3 different people reporting to 2 to 3 different organizations, more or less on the same indicators, which makes it super harder, you know, to have access to accurate data. So there's a groundwork, of course, that has to be done. Secondly, if you have some constraints from funders and grant partners, which oblige people to share the data that they have collected over time, and here see data as knowledge. Yeah, I'm referring to the knowledge, but it can be also shared in forms of data. One last example I would like to give, I've mentioned the fertilizer technical working group that we have at the national level. Recently, we started gathering countries together, between 2 to 3 countries. The last was Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, who met together to be able to validate the statistics. And this is a great also avenue to share knowledge on site, in person, which is looking at the best practices, the challenges, etc. But one more time, having platforms that serve as a repository for an entire country, region, or continent like we do, looking at the websites I've shared with you, is also a great way to share knowledge. There's a lot of avenue from a technical perspective. We've mentioned open sources, we've mentioned APIs, etc. These are available tools, these are available data. I think it's about, you know, being informed, being educated about it, and willing to try at least, because cost is becoming less and less as an issue. So as a takeaway here, I think there is a need for a consensus on data sharing and access. Why not use principle, of course, but all this put together, in my opinion, will ensure a consistent, not only reporting effort, but also knowledge sharing across countries, and why not at the continental level. Over, back to you, Barry.
Thanks, Usman. Omar, I feel like you have some thoughts as well.
Yeah, so data is a resource, and we will always need to agree that there is a limitation of what should be shared and what should not be shared. Similar to the government, always they share some and they have a limitation on especially when it is something that is going to be different from the protection of the personal data protection, right? But I think the most important, as we are seeing in the EU now, the issue of data sharing, of patients and all this kind of stuff. This is going still until we have a clear value proposition for each country. Because remember, there is this collaborate and compete in a similar way that each country needs to fight for its economy and all kind of stuff. So there are different levels of framework on sharing of knowledge, information, and data. And the most important part to me is the key drivers of each segment of those levels needs to understand and map the key stakeholders and understanding what value each partner can attain or can bring in onto the table, so that the framework is very clear. We now some of the countries treat data as a strict limit of elections, sharing and everything. So I think to me, for example, in Tanzania now, one of the key areas was to develop a framework for data sharing. And again, we know that data collection is a very expensive, and maybe the government will not be able to do themselves, how we could also get the support of the private sectors, NGO on the data collection, and trust those data and be included as official data for the government. So unless all these things are very clear and agreed upon by key stakeholders, then I think that will be the time where we can have a really enhanced data sharing framework and knowledge sharing among. A similar situation for countries. We have seen from the SADC countries, from the EAC countries, and all this is because still everybody needs to trust and believe that there's a value that countries or its entity or it is ministry will be able to do that. However, there are some clear areas, for example, data sharing within the same entities. To be honest, that needs to be tackled in a different approach, because it is more about making sure the systems of people and the infrastructure is working very well to enhance that data flow. So to me, I think there are different levels that we need to consider in planning and facilitating this collaboration and data sharing framework in order to make sure the benefits of these data, it is for the country. Remember, if we don't also have a proper framework in the data sharing, some people might misuse this data. Also, it becomes another side of the coin on what data can bring into the society. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks so much, Omar. That was really helpful, additional framing. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I just want to take a pause here in case there are any questions or comments from our intimate audience. Please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat function. And while you're thinking, just a little bit of a plug from our side. My colleague Joshua is one of the attendees in the audience today. And we've been thinking a lot at DG about this question of what it looks like to share knowledge, what it looks like to support others in the digital ag space in particular, to not reinvent the wheel. Part of why we have silos, why we have a lack of interoperability, which I think Usman also framed for us at the beginning of this conversation, is that there are so many initiatives that often are very similar to one another or even duplicate one another's work. So part of why knowledge sharing is important is to say, look, we tried this, and either this worked really well or it failed, and that other people can learn and scaffold and scale from that. So we have a grant with the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, to provide digital ag tech advisory support across their portfolio in Africa and the Middle East. And one of the things they've asked us to do is to capture the things that we've learned, the lessons that we've learned along the way, so that others both within the IFAD universe and outside can learn from it. So I'm going to drop that resource in the channel. And you can ping Joshua and Bai if you have other questions about that. But it's a great resource where we've started to gather insights we've learned from working in Malawi and Sudan, and we've got many more countries coming to the pipeline. So check that out and let us know if you have any questions. How are we doing? Still got a couple minutes left. I don't see any questions or comments. So maybe I'll come back to our panelists. I think we might have lost Omar temporarily, but Usman, Fumibi, is there anything that we haven't, is there any angle of interoperability or partnerships that we haven't talked about yet that you wish I had asked you? That means you said all that there is to be said. Excellent.
So
we've solved the problem.
Beverly, to me, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm saying, to me, the most important part, especially in the enhancement of adoption of the technology to smallholder farmers, I always think on the approach that technology like WhatsApp and others, which, to be honest, there was not much really energy and heavy effort were used to make these things to be adopted. And I think we need to go on the table in terms of our innovative capability and see how we could come up with this kind of technology where the farmers can quickly be attracted, trust, and jump on it. This is very, very important to me. And as long as people say, if the digital technology is going to address farmers' problem that they are facing, then there is definitely a possibility of that to be taken and upscaled. If it doesn't, then that's where the challenge is. And the business model needs also to be changed to make sure that it promotes appetite for adoption, as compared with where most of the business model want to outright sell, and when people are still even preparing the land for planting. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Omar. And I think that's a perfect place to end. We are at time, or with 30 seconds to go. Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Oluwafunmi. Thank you, Usman. Thanks to Ruthie as well.
Thank you very much.
Coordinated, and we hope to see you all again soon. Have a lovely, enjoy the rest of your time at ICT for Ag.